you are walking through the marble corridors of a Roman villa in 58 BCE, but the silence feels different today. The servants whisper in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously toward the closed doors of the women's quarters. Outside, Roman legions are preparing for another campaign, but inside these walls, a different kind of conquest has already begun. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you view one of history's most celebrated figures. This isn't the story of military genius or political brilliance found in your history textbooks. This is the documented account of how Julius Caesar transformed the wives and daughters of his enemies into instruments of his imperial ambition, creating a systematic approach to conquest that extended far beyond the battlefield. Before we examine what really happened when Caesar encountered the families of those who opposed him, if you find these deeper investigations into ancient Rome compelling, consider subscribing. It genuinely helps us uncover more forgotten stories that traditional histories often overlook or sanitize entirely. Now, let's explore what Caesar's treatment of enemy wives reveals about the true nature of Roman conquest and why modern historians have struggled to address these uncomfortable truths about the man who became a god. The year is 60 BCE. Caesar has just formed the first triumvirate with Pompey and Crassus, but his sights are already set on Gaul. What most people don't understand is that Caesar's strategy for conquest involved a calculated approach to controlling not just territory, but the most intimate aspects of his enemies' lives. Their families, their marriages, their children became chess pieces in a game where resistance meant consequences that extended far beyond military defeat. When Caesar crossed into Helvetii territory at the beginning of his Gallic campaigns, he encountered Augetorix, a powerful chieftain who had been planning a massive migration of his people. But Augetorix died under mysterious circumstances before Caesar could capture him. What happened next reveals the systematic precision with which Caesar approached enemy families. Augetorix's widow and daughters didn't simply disappear into obscurity. They became valuable assets in Caesar's expanding network of political control. Archaeological evidence from sites across ancient Gaul supports written accounts of Caesar's approach to conquered families. Excavations at Roman administrative centers have uncovered correspondence discussing the placement of Gallic noblewomen within Roman households, revealing a bureaucratic system that tracked these relationships like military supplies. Residential complexes show evidence of separate quarters designed specifically for housing captured family members, indicating that accommodating enemy wives and daughters had become standard procedure in Roman conquest. The capture of Ambiorix's family during the rebellion of the Eburones provides perhaps the most systematic example of how Caesar weaponized marriage and kinship for political control. When Ambiorix launched his surprise attack that decimated 2 Roman legions, Caesar's response went far beyond military retaliation. Roman forces specifically targeted the homes and settlements where the wives and children of rebel leaders lived, understanding that controlling families provided more effective leverage than controlling territory alone. Contemporary sources, including Caesar's own commentaries, describe how captured Gallic women were distributed among Roman officers not as random spoils of war, but according to carefully calculated political arrangements. These weren't impulsive decisions made by soldiers in the heat of battle. They were deliberate policies designed to create permanent bonds between Roman commanders and conquered territories through the most intimate possible connections. The logistics of these operations reveal the industrial scale of Caesar's approach to enemy families. Transportation networks were established specifically for moving captured women and children to Roman settlements throughout the expanding empire. Supply systems provided resources for wedding ceremonies, household establishments, and ongoing supervision of these arranged relationships. Communication networks ensured that information about compliance and resistance reached Caesar's headquarters quickly enough to enable immediate responses to any signs of rebellion. When Caesar encountered Vercingetorix, the charismatic leader who united Gallic tribes against Roman expansion, the stakes of this family-based strategy became clear. Vercingetorix had carefully studied Caesar's methods and understood that traditional military resistance alone wouldn't be sufficient. He implemented policies designed to protect Gallic families from Roman capture, including relocating wives and children to heavily fortified positions that would be difficult for Roman forces to reach. But Caesar adapted his tactics accordingly. Rather than simply attempting to capture Vercingetorix's immediate family, Roman intelligence networks began identifying and targeting the extended family connections that bound Gallic tribal alliances together. Sisters, cousins, daughters of allied chieftains, even the wives of important military commanders became targets for systematic capture and political marriage arrangements. The siege of Alesia in 52 BCE demonstrates how these family-based policies functioned on a massive scale. When Vercingetorix retreated to the hilltop fortress, Caesar didn't simply surround the military position. Roman forces simultaneously moved to capture the families of every significant leader inside the fortress, understanding that personal anguish would prove more effective than military pressure in forcing surrender. Archaeological excavations around Alesia have revealed evidence of temporary holding facilities constructed specifically for processing captured family members. These weren't improvised prison camps created during the siege. They were sophisticated installations with specialized quarters for different categories of captives, suggesting that Caesar's forces had developed standardized procedures for managing conquered families. The psychological warfare embedded in these tactics extended far beyond individual families. When word spread throughout Gaul about what happened to the wives and daughters of those who resisted Roman authority, entire communities began surrendering without battle, rather than subject their loved ones to documented Roman procedures. Fear became a weapon more effective than siege engines or cavalry charges, and Caesar deliberately cultivated his reputation for systematic control over enemy families. The documentation systems Caesar's administration used to track these marriages and family arrangements reveal the bureaucratic sophistication behind what appeared to be personal relationships. Clay tablets and papyrus records recovered from Roman administrative sites contain detailed information about which Gallic women were assigned to which Roman officers, their tribal connections, their potential political value, and their compliance with imperial policies. These records treat human beings like strategic assets, cataloging their usefulness for maintaining regional control and preventing future rebellions. The systematic nature of this documentation suggests that Caesar viewed enemy wives not as individuals with their own agency, but as instruments of statecraft whose primary value lay in their ability to cement Roman authority over conquered territories. The resistance that emerged from these policies reveals the human cost of Caesar's systematic approach to conquest. Historical sources document several cases of Gallic noblewomen who attempted to poison their Roman husbands, organized escape networks for other captured women, or maintained secret communications with resistance movements operating throughout the conquered territories. These acts of defiance were met with punishments designed not just to eliminate individual resistance, but to terrorize entire communities into compliance. When Cavarinus's sister attempted to flee her arranged marriage to a Roman centurion, Caesar ordered her execution to be carried out in the central square of her hometown, forcing every resident to witness what happened to those who challenged Roman authority over family arrangements. But the true horror wasn't just in these public displays of brutality. It was in the systematic breeding programs that emerged from Caesar's policies. Roman medical texts from the period include detailed instructions for maintaining the health of pregnant Gallic women, treating them with the same clinical detachment used for valuable livestock. These documents reveal that Caesar's administration had developed sophisticated systems for tracking pregnancies, managing births, and determining which children would be raised as Romans versus which would be sold into slavery. The children born from these forced unions faced circumstances that reveal the long-term implications of Caesar's family-based conquest strategy. Boys with mixed Roman Gallic heritage were often recruited into auxiliary units, their divided loyalties making them useful for suppressing rebellions in their mothers' homelands. Girls were raised as Roman citizens but retained Gallic bloodlines, that gave them potential value for future political marriages designed to cement Roman control over specific territories. Caesar's correspondence with Roman senators reveals the calculated precision behind these policies. Letters discovered in archaeological excavations describe detailed plans for using the children of conquered families as diplomatic tools, trading them between Roman officials to create networks of mutual obligation that would prevent future rebellions. These weren't random decisions made by individual commanders. They were imperial policies developed at the highest levels of Roman government. The scale of these operations becomes clear when examining the logistics required to implement Caesar's family-based conquest across the vast territories of Gaul. Transportation networks moved thousands of captured women and children across hundreds of miles. Administrative systems tracked their locations, their marriages, their pregnancies, and their compliance with Roman expectations. Supply networks provided resources for maintaining these human assets over decades of imperial expansion. When news of Caesar's methods reached Rome, the response from senators and citizens reveals how normalized these practices had become in Roman society. Rather than expressing horror at the systematic exploitation of enemy families, Roman sources celebrate Caesar's innovation in developing more efficient methods of conquest. Cicero's letters praise Caesar's ability to secure territorial control through marriage alliances, treating the suffering of Gallic women as an acceptable cost of imperial expansion. The economic calculations driving Caesar's policies were ruthlessly efficient. A captured Gallic noblewoman could produce children for Roman officers, provide intelligence about tribal politics, serve as a hostage to ensure her family's cooperation, and demonstrate Roman dominance over conquered peoples simultaneously. The return on investment made airily profitable for these human trafficking operations extraordinary Roman commanders across all social classes. Archaeological evidence from Roman military camps throughout Gaul reveals the infrastructure required to maintain these systems. Specialized quarters for housing captured families, medical facilities for managing pregnancies and births, administrative buildings for tracking marriages and political arrangements, and secure communications networks for coordinating these activities across vast distances. These weren't temporary arrangements created during active military campaigns. They were permanent installations built into the empire's conquest infrastructure. The psychological impact on the women themselves emerges from fragments of personal correspondence discovered at various archaeological sites. Letters written in Gallic languages and hidden in household items describe desperate attempts to maintain connections with their original families, religious practices conducted in secret, and coded communications with other captured women experiencing similar circumstances. These documents reveal communities of resistance operating within Caesar's marriage system, but perhaps most revealing are the records of what happened when these women attempted to reclaim their freedom. Administrative documents describe punishments that went far beyond individual retribution. When a chieftain's daughter tried to escape her Roman husband and return to her people, not only was she publicly tortured, but her entire extended family faced consequences designed to terrorize other captured women into compliance. The long-term consequences of Caesar's policies extended far beyond his lifetime, creating social and political structures that would influence the region for generations. The children of these forced unions became the ruling class of Roman Gaul, their mixed heritage providing legitimacy with local populations, while their Roman connections ensured loyalty to imperial authority. But their existence remained dependent on maintaining the systems that had created their families in the first place. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, beginning the civil war that would transform the Roman Republic into an empire, many of these Gallic wives found themselves caught between conflicting loyalties. Some supported Caesar's enemies, hoping his defeat might restore their freedom. Others remained bound to Roman officers who had treated them with relative kindness within the constraints of their captivity. The fate of these women during the Civil War reveals the true nature of their circumstances. Many were abandoned by their Roman husbands who returned to Italy or sought new opportunities in the chaos following Caesar's assassination. Others were murdered to eliminate potential claims their children might make to political authority or property rights. The systematic destruction of these families during the power struggles that followed Caesar's death demonstrates that they had never been genuine marriages or political alliances. What emerges from the archaeological record and historical documentation is a picture of calculated exploitation operating on an imperial scale. Caesar's treatment of enemy wives wasn't diplomatic marriage or cultural integration. It was systematic political warfare that transformed women into instruments of conquest, their children into hostages, and their families into mechanisms of control that operated across 3 continents for over a generation. The evidence carved in stone, written in blood, and buried beneath centuries of romanticized history tells a story that shatters every heroic narrative about Caesar's legacy. For over a decade, thousands of women vanished into a machine of systematic exploitation that operated with bureaucratic precision, while Rome celebrated military genius. Their names were erased from official records, their voices silenced by imperial propaganda, their humanity reduced to strategic calculations in Caesar's conquest ledgers. This wasn't ancient romance or diplomatic marriage. This was organized subjugation that shaped civilizations, revealing how quickly societies normalize the unthinkable when conquest becomes the ultimate measure of greatness. Caesar didn't just conquer Gaul through military brilliance. He conquered it by transforming the most intimate human relationships into weapons of war, creating precedents that would echo through Roman imperial policy for centuries. The man who became a god built his empire on the systematic destruction of families, reminding us that behind every celebrated conqueror lies a trail of forgotten victims whose suffering was deemed acceptable for the greater glory of empire. When we remember Caesar, we should remember not just his victories, but the price countless women paid for his ambition.